What's up, everybody, and welcome to Growing Up Gaming, your weekly podcast where we meet a new person of the internet to discuss his childhood with gaming and how it inspired their lives today. My name is Mitch Power. Again, thank you guys so much for each and every week returning to the show, subscribing on iTunes and Google Play, rating the show, reviewing it. Again, every week I do appreciate it so much. This week on the show, we have our guest. His name is Edgar Velasco. I met this gentleman on the Comedy Button Facebook group, so he comes on the show to share his stories and also how he happened to ask Santa for gifts in a little bit different way than I was ever used to. Again, if you guys ever want to be on the show, feel free to send me a tweet at GUG Podcast on Twitter or at MitchPower1116 on Twitter as well. Without further ado, let's get things started with Edgar Velasco. Do you remember what got you started in gaming? Do you remember what exactly got you started? Was there any particular person, or did you go to a neighbor's house or a friend's house?
It was usually going to a friend's house because my mom used to babysit a good chunk in the time in her, a lot earlier, like pretty much around like the year 1988 to 1989. My mom basically babysit a lot. And it was always funny because, you know, those kids would always have a Nintendo system, and in one particular time, it was always Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for the NES.
That seems to be a trend. A lot of people, I mean, obviously Turtles at the time were like super popular, so yeah, a lot of people had that. Are you talking like the arcade game, that TMNT arcade game?
No, it was the first one, the one that has almost nothing to do with the actual cartoon.
That's right, yeah. Before the actual like Turtles arcade game actually came out, there was that like, yeah, it was a weird. I know what you're talking about though. It's like super weird.
Yeah, where they fight a guy covered in fire of some weird looking strange beast characters that home in on you. I think the only credible like characters that were part of the actual canon were the Shredder, the final boss, the Technodrome, and I believe a couple of Mousers and Bebop and Rocksteady, but everything else was a weird rock creature, some two-legged thing, right. And some weird purple men, which I guess were supposed to be foot soldiers, but I don't know what they were.
Yeah, it was back then you had to use your imagination and think like, oh, I wonder what this character is. Like they just made stuff up. Like they didn't care. The kids were going to buy it anyways. They didn't care what they did.
Yeah, because, you know, it was mostly like mom's friends or mom's kids who she babysat that had the Nintendo, and they always had this game. It ranged from like, the Nightmare on Elm Street game that was like, I think one of the first 4-player, games for the Nintendo. And then, you know, it was Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, a game that nobody knew how to exactly play until you, I guess, you know, bought the Nintendo Power magazines. And it was always weird that I always I didn't know what to do in that game, but I still liked it overall. And I think the thing that really got me was, you know, the sounds. The thing that always stood by me, that always struck me, you know, that I remember definitely fondly, was like the sound that came out from the game, you know, the music, you know, just like anyone. Exactly. And the thing that mostly came to everybody's mind was like whenever you think about Super Mario Brothers, the first thing you remember is stage 1-1,
right?
Where it's and then it just gets you. You know, Ninja Turtles had that to a certain degree, especially that first one. Castlevania 2 had an amazing soundtrack, and then it kind of stood with me where the fact that I began to, you know, as much as I liked playing the games, you know, I also appreciated the music at a time that, you know, video game music, not many people would really pay attention to it. And then, you know, you fall right into the whole craze of the 90s when Capcom just released every, you know, Disney related, like the Disney Afternoon type of game, you know, right. DuckTales, Darkwing Duck, and like, holy crap, you begin to appreciate not just the games nor the franchises, but also like, oh wow, these are some good melodies, some good tracks, which of course I guess led to me to do a video game music podcast later on. But I think the story, it's funny, like it was always hand-me-downs and, you know, playing a friend's NES that got me into playing video games, and just, you know, I wanted one so much that I created a special type of way of making a Christmas list for a quote unquote Santa. I'm doing hand gestures here.
Yes, because every kid that's listening, Santa's real. Santa's not fake or anything. If anybody tells you that, they're lying. So no, absolutely, the Santa list, absolutely.
It's not your mom or your uncle dressed as a man.
It's not. Santa's real, kids. Remember that.
Well, here's the funny thing. Do you remember like Sears catalogs?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody had their the Sears catalog or the Toys R Us catalog. You got those giant catalogs that had all the toys, and yes, absolutely.
The ones that used to come in the Sunday paper.
Yep.
Or, when you walk into the mall, they give you the little circular. I used to have a technique. Rather than, like every other kid who writes a letter to Santa, who would actually write down, I want a Nintendo, I want this game. I made it a more visual kind of setting where I actually cut pictures of the item I knew so that Santa would have an easier way of finding what I wanted. So I would go through the Toys R Us catalog, the Sears circular, the newspaper stuff, and I would literally just look, okay, this is what I want. Rather than writing it, I'm just going to make it easier on you, big red man. I'm just going to cut it, paste it on a piece of paper. So at least this is what I want. So whenever you go to your store or your magical elf shop, you can just point to that and I can have it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to make Santa's job a lot easier for him because, Santa wants to make sure he gets you the right stuff instead of you saying, this one game, but then all of a sudden you get this different game instead, and then you're all sad because Santa wasn't paying attention when Santa made that game for you. So, yeah, absolutely. No, it's that's definitely a good thing because I'm sure there are plenty of kids out there who put down something on their Christmas list without a picture and got the wrong item, and probably afterwards had the same idea you did. Like, damn, I probably should have just cut a picture out. I remember getting those and just like circling what I wanted, but I never actually cut it out and put it on paper. I just circled what I wanted and then just stared at my catalog all day long. Like, God, I hope I get this, man. I hope I get this. Like, it was funny because you would hang on to those basically from like Black Friday or October when they would send them out until Christmas. Like, you would just keep looking at the crap you wanted, which I don't know what that did for people, but yeah, it was just, it helped me at least because I would just hang on to them. And some of them were huge. Like, some of them felt so, and again, I could be my mind just, again, nostalgia plays tricks on your head, but I remember them being giant catalogs, and I'm like, man, this is so cool. And of course, you have to skip through all the garbage, like the tools and the clothes, and you're like, no, I don't want any of that crap. And then, of course, skip all the girls' pages that had all the Barbie stuff. You're like, I don't want any of that stuff. I just want to go right to the stuff I want, which was like Power Rangers stuff, Star Wars figures, video game stuff. That was like basically what I would just circle over and over again.
Yeah, and definitely I definitely hang on to those for a while, even if it wasn't Christmas or my birthday. I just like looking at it. Adults have their US weekly, magazine tabloid, and certain people had their comics. I had the Sears catalog, so I could just look over this page where they would have these weird, kind of like the toy commercials of old, where magically this kid playing the playset had an amazing backyard where they could have battles in the tundra of the desert to the jungle. Like, what kid has this backyard that you're able to use these toys in that proper setting? Exactly,
like the Battle of Hoth, and all of a sudden, like, you look and they're on Hoth. Like, hey, where's that setting at? My favorite thing is now that some of the things that you look at, like if you look at Lego commercials that are on TV, because obviously I have kids, I watch Nickelodeon, on the Lego commercials, it actually says like background set not included, because I'm sure somebody got sued somewhere down the line where they were like, hey, where's the backdrop with all the cool buildings in the background? That didn't come in the box. And like, I'm sure somebody sued somebody. So now, just like when you have to put on a coffee may be hot, like they have to put in there now, like, does not include backdrops.
And you know what? You are correct, because the earlier commercials never had that. Like, you're like, oh, I got Snake Mountain from He-Man. I can play it on my playset in my backyard that has all this massive space. It has the right type of foliage,
right.
All these trees. It has this nice bit of sand, so it can look like a weird desert, I can have this moat, or my G.I. Joe army is fighting Cobra on this weird, almost, like monsoon-esque weather type background. And then later on, I guess someone did actually sue, because later on those commercials eventually had, like, in the bottom tagline, does not include whatever background that apparently you see.
Just like when I bought the Crossfire board game, I wanted the arena you were playing in, man. Where the hell was my arena? Like, apparently that didn't come with the board game. So no, like, that's, again, it's so stupid, because now we have to put those things in there, because coffee may be hot. Are you kidding me? Like, somebody said, oh my God, the coffee you gave me was so hot it burned me. Like, common sense now, we have to put things on packages now to make sure that common sense. The only thing we had to worry about back in the day was, like, does this thing have batteries already, or do I have to go get some? Like, that was the only thing we had to worry about, because at least they would come out and say that batteries not included.
Batteries not included, yeah.
They would say that, or batteries included, and that was like the greatest thing ever, because then you didn't have to go, Grandma, do you have 17 AA batteries? She's like, no, who the hell has that? So yeah, that was always a fun thing. So then you kind of like played secondhand a lot of NES. Did you ever end up getting your own, or did you kind of like progress and get your own, like, later on, like, next gen, like, at the time, like SNES or anything?
Actually, I can tell you the story of how I got my NES eventually. I actually know the year correctly. It was around the year of 1991. The reason I know this is because, like, a good chunk of game, I remember it by the back catalog of Nintendo games that I played at the time. And around that time, like, Super Mario Brothers 3 had already come out, Chip and Dale, Nightmare on Elm Street, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game.
Right, the proper good one.
The proper good one. And one evening, I believe it was a Friday evening, my mom decided to, because, I didn't get my Nintendo yet, and it was still, at the time, it was still not even hitting its peak, where all, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3, Castlevania 3, all the other good games came out, but a good chunk of them were already available. Especially Super Mario Brothers 3. I mean, if anybody who didn't see that movie, The Wizard, didn't know about Super Mario Brothers 3, what kind of rock were you hiding under?
Right. That was a big advertisement for Super Mario 3, and it always pissed me off that the kid in there knew where the warp whistle was. Like, hey, real quick, none of us had played this. How the hell do you know where that is? Like, this is ridiculous.
Hey, it was a cheat code before cheat codes, before Nintendo Power got to it.
He was probably, he was probably Neo from the Matrix. Like, he could see the game code and knew where to go. That's probably the only way I remember that. Like, oh my God, he could go up there and get the warp whistle. Like, real quick, how do any of you kids know about this? Like, you kids just saw the power glove in the movie, and you thought that was so awesome. And it's like, how the hell are you gonna know in Mario 3 that just got premiered live on this stage? Oh, not to mention you're in front of this giant crowd. How the hell are you gonna know where that warp whistle is? That was always bull.
It was, but again, I guess they needed to give out one cheat out there so kids can automatically already know about it.
Yeah, that was funny too, because of course, if you were one of those cool kids that saw the movie, you knew where it was, and if somebody didn't see the movie, they thought you were awesome when you were just a kid copying some other kid on a movie.
Exactly. And definitely, again, it was literally the most, like, a high-end commercial, a 2-hour commercial featuring Fred Savage and friends.
Yeah, Fred Savage and gang.
And Bo Bridges and was it Kevin? No, not Kevin Bacon. Was it Kevin Bacon? No, it was Christian Slater. I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Dude, man, the Power Glove. I love the Power Glove. It's so bad. Like, you watch it now and you just cringe. But again, though, it's funny because some of those movies now, of course, we thought they were awesome because we were stupid kids. Then you go back and watch some of them, and they're either so bad you can't stand to watch it anymore, or they're so bad that it's hilarious and you keep watching it. And that's kind of one of that type of movie. Like, it's like, of course some people will still say they like it, and that's fine. But I do like when you go back to certain things and you're like, I'm ashamed that I like this, but then it's almost funny just to, like, hate watch it and just laugh at all the ridiculous things that happened.
And then you watch and begin to question, why was I into this? Like, this is dumb, or this is stupid. Like, wait, I must have been a really, really a kid who was really easily taken advantage of.
Well, it's just you were a kid. That's the whole thing, is like, you're a dumb kid. I mean, games were the same way too, though. I mean, you go back and look at certain games and you're like, no, this game was really good. But then you go back and you're like, no, this game is trash. Like, I liked trash back in the day. So, I mean, unfortunately, it happens and stuff like that, but, yeah, I mean, there's games that you go back and look on. I looked, my son started getting into Power Rangers around the same time I did when I was like 6. And, thankfully though, he had Netflix, so he could see every one of them he wanted to. And I watched season 1 with him, and, that's not good. It's not a good show. And I loved it. I loved it with all my heart. I thought of nothing but Power Rangers. I was there Saturday morning, every morning watching that. And, I feel terrible for my mom because my mom had to sit there and watch that garbage. And then she took me to that movie, which is not a good movie. And it's just, again, though, we're kids. We don't have a formulated opinion until you get older. And then you're like, oh man, what was I doing?
That's true. That's definitely true. Oh yeah. Where was I? Oh yeah. And like it was, I believe it was like the summer of it was like during like the fall of 1991. And my mom, out of nowhere, decided to take me to, take me shopping, buy some groceries and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. I guess she needs help carrying some bags. And then for one reason or the other, we stopped by a Woolworths. Are you familiar with Woolworths brand?
I am not. No, explain that.
A Woolworth is basically like any one of those stores that carry everything from it's like a poor man's Sears. Okay. It was a staple of New York for a long, long time. Again, it's one of those lost memories of certain brands like Nobody Beats the Wiz, even Radio Shack to these days now. It was one of those stores that, carried toys, electronics, clothing, kitchen, bed and bath, all that and whatnot. And we walked into it, tools, of course. And we walked into it, and my mom just talked to the clerk behind the register. And I'm here looking around like, why are we here? Are we buying tools? Is there paint we need to buy? Or are we buying clothing? And out of nowhere, the clerk from underneath or the back room, he pulls out a freaking entire, and he has playset, the controller, the guns and everything.
Right.
I'm like, and here I am, and then my mind is blown like, wait, I didn't know Woolworths would do this and all that. Later, I would find out that it was because of layaway. For those who don't know, layaway is kind of like what Rent-A-Center does, where you pay a specific amount for a product, but you're still able to use it. But unlike Rent-A-Center, where you pay weekly payment for a particular item you're using until you finally own it, layaway was you would pay for the item first, I believe like a specific amount per week. And then once the amount was accumulated and you kind of paid it off, that's when they would give it to you.
Right. It was essentially like holding an item. Like, I can't pay for all of this now, but let me give it to you. I will pay you X amount per week or per month or whatever. And then once it's paid, they give it to you. But it kind of guarantees the item. Exactly.
And then, later on I would find out about that. That's how she was able to afford it. And it was the re-release playset, because if I remember correctly, because the zapper was orange, and I always wondered about that, like, why is the zapper orange? I thought the zapper was gray. Of course, later on I would find out as well that the reason was because, during the time, I think it was in 1989, that whole situation with the policeman shooting the kid with a fake toy gun, which eventually regulated all toy guns to be colored like a pack of Twizzlers.
They would have to have like bright orange tips, or they couldn't basically look like a real gun. It had to look as, they try to get around it, but they basically started making guns not look super realistic so stupid kids wouldn't just point them at cops and get shot.
Yeah. So I always wonder, like, why is that orange? But for me, that was like almost secondary or third to the fact that I had a Nintendo, carrying it. I do remember the first thing my mom told me that, as long as you keep your grades up, this is what happens, like rewarded, because it was during, about to go into the summer, and then, it was because, I accumulated good grades, and as a reward, Senna didn't give it to me. My mother did. And I definitely, and even to this day, I still have my Nintendo, and I still play my Nintendo. It still works the same way it did years ago. And I always, was very appreciative of that because, I had it for my own, and me and my little brothers and sisters would play it on the weekends. The funny part is my mom was very restricted because, of course, it was always studies first, school first. So she had this, she devised a very devious way. So when she would step out, you know, via shopping, or she went to work, or we got to school and she wasn't there yet from work, that we wouldn't be able to play the Nintendo until the weekend. She would literally just hide the controllers. And for
Fair
a kid, but the thing is, it worked, because for us, it was like the only thing that left us to do sometimes would just be put in the game and just watch the intro loop for a couple of seconds. You know, kind of like, okay, I see, you know, in certain games just had the title screen and then just loop, while other games at least had some gameplay or a story a little bit. So it's like, for like the DuckTales game for the NES, all it was the looping DuckTales theme. Like, okay,
Right.
I'll watch this for about a minute and then let me go back to my studies or clean my room.
Yeah, it was funny because I knew certain parents that would either take away the controllers or they would be smarter and take away the power cord to where you basically had a brick that just sat there and couldn't do anything. Like, that was when you knew your buddy was grounded. He's like, my mom took my power cord, and we're all like, damn, what did you do? What did you do to get that taken away? Like, that was always the compromise. It was controllers, game, or just power cord. And, you know, I knew the kids that definitely had power cords taken away. Controllers, not so much, just because for whatever reason, I remember, and I don't know why, for some reason, everybody I remember who had an NES had like 7 controllers for no reason. You know, like everybody I knew who had one, like got it from like a garage sale or something. And everybody had like 7 controllers, and like this controller's A button didn't work as well, or this select button didn't work, but they still had the controllers because some games didn't use it. Like, it's just, it didn't make sense. It was just so weird. But, yeah, I mean, the controller thing was less common in where I grew up. It was more power cords taken away, or just like straight, like, I don't remember anybody taking a full on console, but you know, at least that's fine. Did you kind of continue down that Nintendo route then and just go Super Nintendo and everything down the road?
I definitely went Super Nintendo down the road, but again, I definitely also was Sega Genesis as well. So pretty much it went Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and then everything else down, you know, that same direction. Definitely Super Nintendo because of how the commercials, and come on, that young Paul Rudd convinced me that it looks great.
Ant-Man convinced you at an early age to get a Super Nintendo. So it's, yeah, that commercial. It's funny because he grew up, you know, he grew into an actual like actor, and you know, that always happens though. You always, as young actors, you see those types of commercials where it's just, you know, that's what they had when they first got their job. So that's kind of what they did. So did you ever have, I don't even remember mentioning this, did you ever have like brothers and sisters to play stuff co-op with or anything?
I did. You know, I have 2 brothers and a sister. But the sister was never wanting to play it. She would watch it, you know, and occasionally, you know, just go watch her shows or whatever. Or for her, it was her time so she can watch the movies or the show she wanted on the TV, while me and my brother were playing in our room, the Nintendo. It was definitely difficult for certain, considering there was a small amount of 2-player games. Luckily, you know, Ninja Turtles 2 we were able to get it. Ninja Turtles 3, even Super Mario Brothers 2, with the anger of, you know, having whoever was player 1, whatever Mario game it was, whoever was player 1, you know they were going to beat the game. And then once they beat it, then it was your turn for player 2 to start.
Right.
And you've seen everything.
Yeah, exactly. And that was also too back. It's so funny because like, it's hard to consider what people say is a multiplayer game. Like, technically, Mario 1 is a 2-player game, but you're taking turns. You know what I mean? You're not like playing at the same time. And then you have games like Contra where you are playing at the same time. So some people will say like, what's actually considered a multiplayer game? Is it you could take turns so 2 people can technically play the game, or is it only when it considers, you know, 2 people playing at the same time? But, you know, that's, I think at least if you had people to play with, and that was, you know, cool at least and everything. So did you, like the Turtles arcade game, that was definitely 2-player.
Mm-hmm.
Because that was definitely one of those that was 2-player and everything. So, so then you went Super Nintendo, and then did you ever like get to play Genesis around that time then? Did you have any friends in the neighborhood that had it, or did you guys basically all have Supers?
You know, everybody growing up always has that kid in the neighborhood or that friend, but more importantly, that kid in the neighborhood who gets the newest systems like without ever thought. Like the minute it comes out, that kid has it. I had that kid in my neighborhood where whenever the newest systems would come out, this kid and it would have that system already available with some games. So, I had my Super Nintendo, and again, occasionally this other kid that I think my mom was best friends with, her mom, he would invite us over and whatnot, and he would play the Genesis, and like that's when I got to see how Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, but more importantly, of course, the game. Exactly. Here's Moonwalker. Let's play Moonwalker. Okay. And it was like, oh, this is not bad. Hey, the music sounds alike, on pretty much a lot. And, of course, it was, turned upside down, with the birth of a certain blue hedgehog isn't it weird that right now is discussed like it was in 1992 and stuff?
Right. Yeah, it's just it's funny because you bring up Michael Jackson's Boom, and again, like the funny thing is that game wasn't terrible. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't terrible either. It's funny because it's been a very long time since I've heard anybody bring that game up. I clearly remember it, but it's just been a while since that's why I laughed when you brought it up, because it's just like, man, I haven't even thought about that game in quite some time.
Yeah, everybody always talks about like Altered Beast, Sonic, Streets of Rage. No, I bring up Michael Jackson's Moonwalker because that was the first Sega Genesis game I saw. So like it's still ingrained in my mind. Second was like Sonic and then Altered Beast.
Right. Well, I mean the other thing too is like everybody, because now it's not a given, but like pack-in games back in the day was basically everybody's first experience. Like, I mean, when you think Genesis, you think Sonic. And the funny thing, at least they did, was when Sonic 2 came out, they swapped the pack into Sonic 2. When 3 came out, they swapped it to 3. Like, they would just, whatever the best Sonic game was at the time, or whatever the latest one was, that's when they just packed that in. But then, same thing. Super Mario World, and then, of course, later on down the road, when All-Stars came out, that was packed in. It's just funny because that's kind of that's why everybody with Genesis, especially, because everybody's first memory is just Sonic, just because everybody friggin' had Sonic. Like, whatever the latest Sonic was, that's what you had to, go off of, especially if you weren't as lucky to get another game, you know what I mean? Like, you could be like my parent or my grandma was like, cool, you got a game with it. You don't need another one. I'm like, yeah, I don't, I guess.
That is all too familiar because, again, at the time when I had my Super Nintendo, my Sega Genesis, and my Nintendo, before the whole, PlayStation 2, Sega Dreamcast, Sega Saturn, all the rest of the 32-bit genre, I had, I believe, about 4 to 5 memberships to different video rental stores in my area, just so if this particular video rental store didn't have the game or I was looking for, I would go to the next one and the next one, right, or the next one. It's like literally like it was a Blockbuster. The other two were mom and pop video rental stores, and the other one was kind of like a video rental store, but it wasn't. But it was under someone else's membership.
Yeah, I remember a Friday night tradition in my family was there was a grocery store that had a video rental store in it. So like when you first walk in, there was the video rental place. So you just like stop there first, figure out what you got. But our tradition was video game or movie or both. If my dad wanted to watch some movie and wanted to shut me up, he'd be like, cool kid, here, go get a game. You can play it in your room. And then a pizza. They sold like those like, Costco style pizzas that the grocery store made. So that was like like a pizza, movie or game, and that was it. Like that was like a Friday tradition for so many years.
Yeah, and it was definitely for me in terms of like going to about 4 different stores to find a particular title, and if they didn't have that particular game, I would just venture back to another one, just saying, okay, let me balance which one should I rent. And again, during those times, mom and pop stores, for any new game, if I recall, was straight up $5. But if you rented it over the weekend, you can hold on to that game up until Monday evening when you can return it.
Right.
So that was always the best time for me to like rent a game as well as a VHS movie. So because at least they let you hold it for like a couple extra days. So then, my weekend's planned.
Yeah. It's also funny too when people had certain games that they would continue to just rent over and over and over and over. And like, you would just do that and everything, and you would end up paying for it. Like, just you could have bought the damn game instead of just renting it over and over.
I definitely agree with you on that. And more importantly, even worse, a flip side of the coin was when we, where we had, again, we didn't know much about game quality or like whether the game was good or bad. We just rented it, and we, sometimes we knew when we got a bad game, we couldn't really return it because sometimes my mom would say it either needs to be broken or you have to beat it if you want to go back to the store and switch it for something else. And, for many of us, when we had that bad game, our parents would tell us like, no, you either need to beat it or play it a little bit until we can go back and return it. So some of us had that whole Stockholm syndrome of playing bad games. That's why I think a good chunk of people who play like bad games wasn't because they liked it, was because sometimes by a outside force of nature, we were told you need to at least play it a little bit or beat it before you get a chance to play another one. So like for me, it was the endless cycle of LJN games. That colorful rainbow, looked very friendly, but it carried a lot of crap games.
Yeah, pretty much. I don't remember a single good one of those games at all. Okay, so then after the SNES and everything, where did you end up going to after that? Did you continue just keep going PlayStation route, or did you go to actual like PlayStation like I did?
I went PlayStation, but I went PlayStation, then back to Nintendo 64 and Sega CD out of all things, and then Sega Saturn and all that, and Dreamcast and all stuff like that. So like for some I went forward, and for some I went backwards, but because by that age I had enough money to buy it on my own, be it used and stuff. So during the PlayStation, like literally the middle part of the PlayStation period, I went back and bought a Nintendo 64 so I can know what the deal was about. I owned a Sega Dreamcast, which I played to death. I definitely had, I played the original PlayStation, the original Xbox. Like literally pretty much after that initial Sega Genesis and every Super Nintendo SNES, I pretty much followed suit with every other console, except for the Sega Jaguar and, the 3DO.
Yeah, those, I literally don't remember a single person owning it or playing it. Now, maybe because where I grew up wasn't the most highfalutin area, but I literally don't remember. Like, I didn't know about those systems until I was like seriously a lot older. Like, I didn't know 3DO, TurboGrafx. Like, I personally just never did any of that stuff. Like, I never heard of anybody even doing that stuff either.
No, neither did I. And the closest thing I ever saw to gameplay for the CDI was the infomercials that would promote, oh, we got Mario's Hotel and Link's whatever for the CDI, those horrendous, horrible Nintendo CD games.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's the same thing as like, I look back now and I was like, what are you talking about? Zelda games that were on CD-ROMs. Then you look back and they're so bad. They're so bad. But then again, a lot of the games back then that were like the full motion, minus like certain ones like Dragon's Lair and that type of stuff, like there was some bad games like that. Like I remember the only thing because I had CD and all that was Night Trap, when like people lost their complete minds over it. And then now you look at the re-release, which is coming out, and it's so tame. Like it's not bad at all. Like it's not like graphically violent really. Like, yeah, there's some scenes in there that are like, oh, that's kind of crazy. But now you look at like today's standards of games and like that's the most tame thing, I bet. Like I don't even think that game might get like a teen rating now when it was like the worst thing in the world back then.
It's weird to know that, yeah, because right now you could probably watch the entire cutscenes like on YouTube and whatnot, and then you watch it and like they were offended because girls were running around in underwears. This wasn't even thongs and everything. It was like granny panties, or even then they were They were
Right.
very moderately covered up, for that time, and people went over the hill for that. Like, wait, this is bad, comedically bad, but I don't think it's bad enough that warrants like whatever the attention it got during that time.
Yeah, it was really bad. Like, government got involved, and like that, along with like Mortal Kombat and like all those games, is when the rating system came about and everything. Yeah, it's just kind of crazy to see where that all led. So like you said, by the time you got old enough to where PlayStation stuff, you went backwards and everything, which is always fun too, because then when you go back, you can always get a good history lesson of like all the games that came out before you got the system. So that's always, a good thing as well. So then you actually were old enough to where you just had money just to do what you wanted to. Then you had your own job and everything. Cause that's always the fun thing. Like, it's always the give and take, right? Like, you get to the point where you make money and you're like, all I'm going to do is buy all these games. But then you're working, so you don't have time to play them all. Like, that's the only thing that sucks. Like, in your head, all you keep thinking is, man, when I get older, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to buy every game that comes out. Like, it's just crazy.
And then again, it's true. And then you forget that, with work comes, your time depletes. And then, of course, work, maybe college, relationship. Eventually, all those things intertwine where they get in the way of that. And especially work, where, my first job was at Blockbuster Video. So I was right there at the epicenter of games. And even then, I wasn't able to rent all the good games that came on day one.
Yeah, I worked at, it wasn't my first job, but I worked at Game Crazy, which was part of Hollywood Video, which was, I don't know if you had Hollywood Videos where you grew up or whatever, but, Game Crazy was attached to Hollywood Video and they were owned by them. So we basically had, access to like free rentals and all that stuff. I remember the only cool thing about the rental side of stuff was obviously we can rent whatever we wanted and there was no problems. But the stuff that we got, because they used to get that stuff a week early before it came out. So like the games or whatever would come out Tuesdays, movies would come out Tuesdays, and then they would basically let you check them out, but only for like a day or two. They didn't want you hanging on to it like the whole time. But I remember that being a big deal when like new games would come out and I'd be like, guys, I'm going to get this game a week early. If you guys want to come over and play it, you guys can. And we did that a lot. Same thing with movies too. Like, I would just get a bunch of people to come over and watch a movie a week early. That was like one of those weird perks of working at a place like that.
Funny you mentioned that, because I was also an assistant manager to two GameStop stores in two different districts, and we did the same thing. Let's see. I was an assistant manager to the one on 14th Street in Manhattan and the other one on Chelsea Piers. And GameStops would do that as well. When they received the title before the actual release date, you were able to borrow it. But you had to sign off on a book. So when you return it, you have to sign it back in. Like, that's how I was able to get, some heads up on certain games. So then I can broaden my knowledge in terms of trying to get those reservation sales on my end.
Yeah, you could. I mean, the reservation goals were always fun at Game Crazy, because it's like, how many MVP cards did you sell? How many pre-orders did you sell? How many? There was always those metrics you had to hit. But that was always fun when you got, because we didn't check it out from our end. Like, we just Hollywood Video would get them, so we would just rent them that way. But yeah, I know that GameStop has their like checkout program or whatever too. But it was still, the funny thing now is like some games you do that, and you can't even do that in this time and age anymore, because there's day one patches that aren't out yet for them, and games are broken when they come out. So unfortunately, that excitement now is kind of, depending on the game you want to play, isn't there, depending on the situation.
Definitely very fleeting. But to get back on, the route that I followed, it was always great. It's funny because in the back of my mind, whenever I played these new games, I would always also remember like the songs or the soundtrack and whatnot. So it made me fully immerse myself even more, where I can actually enjoy the games, more and more. From like the original like Nintendo kind of 8-bit stuff to whatever, like orchestrated background music is used now in games, especially certain AAA, titles.
Oh yeah.
And it always made me appreciate the game more, but eventually as I grew up, made me appreciate the people behind it, and more importantly, give credit to like composers and stuff like that. Where, maybe at the time when the Nintendo came out, people were saying like, wait, they have compositions, there's composers. I thought it all came from one man.
Right. I remember like certain game soundtracks, obviously, the 8-bit, 16-bit genre, or era, I should say. Those were, more just tunes and stuff like that, but they were still good. And of course, the funny ones were when a licensed game tried to mimic a sound, the song with just 8-bit tunes or 16-bit tunes, and like sometimes it worked well, but sometimes it was just a little off. Like they couldn't catch it just right and get the right notes. But yeah, like the only game I remember, I mean, obviously there's certain games like when soundtracks started getting later on was like licensed music, you know what I mean? Like all the Tony Hawk games, come to mind immediately. But then, yeah, like I remember just Halo, like title screen of Halo, and you're just like, wow, this is so, fresh and different compared to, just normal like video game music. It was just, more of an orchestra doing it. It was crazy.
Yeah. And, and the funny thing is like, even looking at things currently, that whole revival of all the retro stuff, is Sonic the Hedgehog's back, and apparently someone wanted Bubsy to be back, and he's coming back for some damn reason. I still don't know.
I saw that too, and I'm like, why? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Why don't we just bring back all these awful Arrow the Acrobat? Why don't we just do that while we're at it?
Awesome Possum. Don't forget Awesome Possum.
You guys just get all those back in there. Bonk. Let's just bring Bonk back.
Oh, God. It's always funny that, whenever someone always tries to do a revival of a certain character or franchise, there's always a whole other people. They want to bring in the whole rest of the bandwagon just to cash in. And it's like, wait, okay, Sonic works because he's had crap games for a while, and this is the only good one. Who in their right mind said, you know what? Let's bring back Bubsy. I would rather have an Earthworm Jim revival than Bubsy.
Right. Yeah, and then also, well, it's fun too, because now the good thing is, and this is really cool, like how they're doing the Sonic Mania, is the fact that it is people who made like fan-made Sonic games that Sega was just like, actually, you guys do a really good job, and hired them. Like, that's awesome. And like how, I think it just depends on like you said, though, it depends on the franchise. Like Sonic, obviously, people are nostalgia for the 2D Sonic games, and obviously the last, I'd say probably 5 3D Sonic games just aren't that great. So a lot of people just don't want them. But then like games like Crash, the remaster for PS4 sold a stupid amount. Like it was shocking, like how it was on UK charts, like #1 for multiple weeks. And it's just like, that's crazy to think that, cause a lot of people don't remember, some of the kids now that play games, they started on PS2, Xbox era. So like the good Crash games weren't even then. They were like, mediocre Crash games or whatever. But like, PlayStation 1 era, it just had all those awesome Crash games. And, again, awesome air quotes, depending on who you talk to. Because now you play them and you're like, was I just bad at these games, or is these games just not good? Like, it's hard. But yeah, man, I guess it depends on the revival, to be honest.
And it's funny you say that, because it is true. Like when, like especially like you said, like the current era of gamers are PS2, original Xbox. So when they release Crash Bandicoot and wonder why people are so nostalgic for it, similar to like when they re-released, when they re-released the Disney Afternoon Collection, or even Sonic Mania, they begin like, why is it so special? Because we grew up in an era when they were awesome. You're just getting the end of it, and you don't understand it. Which is why, when they probably do play Crash Bandicoot to see what's up, they wonder like, this game is difficult. Why do you like it?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too that's not fair for newer kids these days is the fact that these games have like a rewind button. Like Rare Replay did that. Yes. Like the Disney Afternoon Collection did it. It's like, hey, we didn't, granted we had Game Genie, which kind of was our replay button just because it's like infinite lives done. But yeah, dude, I'm like, there was no damn rewind button in Battletoads on Rare Replay. Like, there's no, what the hell is this about? So kids now have it a little bit easier, but also too, they have the internet, which isn't fair because you can watch somebody do it. You just have to, replicate it. When back in the day, it was that one kid that you knew who beat Battletoads or who beat this game without dying. It was just like, there was no Twitch streaming for it or anything like that. It was literally just like, oh man, did you hear Jimmy on the playground? Dude, that guy beat this boss. Like, it's crazy. Now you have to prove it with achievements and shit. You can't just say that shit anymore.
And it's funny because, like, I used to look at old Nintendo Power magazines and GamePro, and they would have, I think, a contest where you would take a picture, screen grab of you beating the game to prove that you beat it, and then I think you would get, like, a bunch of free prizes. And again, this was before digital cameras and everything, so here you got this kid using like a Polaroid camera to take like a CRT television reflection, right, you know, of the end credit scene of a game to prove that he beat it. And sometimes there was that kid who would do that and go to the playground and show his friends, like, see, I beat the game. See, this is the screen grab. See? Some weird CRT TV. You see the scan lines and everything. Like, I think I can see the end credits.
Right. And yeah, I remember there was in some of those Nintendo Powers. I remember it's funny because now you look back at, and like, certain developers are like, or certain like celebrities were on those lists. I remember Cliffy B said he was on there. I think Steve Wozniak, it was either Steve Wozniak or Steve Jobs. One of those two was on there for a game as well. Like, it's just funny because now it's like that was such an elite list, and then some of those people actually ended up coming up and being like successful people. So it's kind of funny too. So then have you, as you've gotten older, obviously, you know, same with me, like I have a family, I have a wife, I have, you know, kids. Has your gaming habits kind of continued, or has it gotten less and less as you grow up with more responsibilities and stuff like that?
I think overall it's kind of, I can neutral, because again, I have a weird job where the hours fluctuate on the daily. So like to have time to play games, I barely even do that. I have a whole back catalog of stuff that I have yet even to play. I think with the most recent game being, you know, Horizon Zero Dawn. That's the only one I just recently beat Yakuza 0. In the middle or by the 75% point of Horizon Zero Dawn, but yet I still have Until Dawn. I still have Uncharted 4, and I have to get the new one. And like and I think the only reason I was able to play Sonic Mania was because again, because of my weird hours of work, I have insomnia. So sometimes I can't sleep. So sometimes I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe if I play something, I'll get to sleep. And on top of that, you know, managing my life, you know, I live by myself in my apartment. So work, as well as, you know, trying to relationships. And more importantly, like I manage 2 other podcasts, one with a friend and the other one by myself about video game music. And then I do a YouTube retrospective show about Saturday morning cartoons. So like finding the time is the most difficult part in a time where I thought I would have the most time.
Right. Yeah, that's the only downfall is like, you know, you get the money and, you know, the resources and all this stuff to do all these cool things, but then life hits you with job, girlfriend, friends, other obligations, etc. Like, it's just a matter of managing your time right to be able to do those things that you want to do and everything. So, I mean, at least, you know, the good thing is like some of the other stuff that you're doing at least can tie into it, you know, so like, you know, some of the podcasts and stuff like that helps and everything when it comes to talking about video games and at least keeping it relative and everything in your, you know, in your hobbies and stuff. So at least that's still good. But yeah, the whole trying to keep up with games, like if I get a moment to play games, you know, I go, man, I want to play this game, or man, I really need to get this other thing done. So it's just a matter of, you know, finding the time and making sure you know, put in enough time to stay relevant. But yeah, I'm definitely, like you said, I'm a fan now of, I don't go out and buy games as soon as they come out. Like I try to play stuff in my backlog first, and then I'll just wait for a game to go on sale and then just pick it up later on, you know, like that's how I tend to do it. Not, you know, unless it's like certain games I'll buy day one without question, but there are games that when I play them, like I buy, especially Christmas time, that's where it sucks because 17 games come out that you want to play. So I'll just get them and then throughout the year just be like, oh yeah, I never played that at all. So then I'll just, you know, spend my time playing that when I get a chance.
It's a gift and a curse, which is, yeah, I'm on that same boat where I don't buy the newer stuff literally on day one. I let it trickle down to where it's maybe at least $20 less, or even to some degree, maybe even just $20, because by the time, I still have my previously owned stuff to play, by the time I beat one title, the newest, franchise game, whatever, dropped significantly, or there's a buy one, get one free kind of deal. So like, you know what? It's beneficial, but it also kind of like irks at me in the back of my head, like, damn, I want to play this day one, but I know that I won't have time for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that's why those, like you said, the buy two, get one free sales, that's where you just stack up. You're like, all right, what games do I eventually feel like I'm going to care to play? So you just stack up on those as best you can. So
exactly.
Absolutely. So, I mean, obviously you already mentioned you have a podcast and all that stuff. So why don't you feel free, go ahead, whore yourself out, say what the name of the shows are, and then obviously everybody knows I'll have links in the show notes as well for all of it.
Well, pretty much an easier way, if anyone wants to contact me or just know what about me, I'm available on Twitter. It's just at MoonSpiderHugs. I run I run a website called the Nostalgia Road Trip, which is just nostalgiaroadtrip.com, where usually my back catalog or new videos are pretty much posted whenever I make them. That's where you'll find my two podcasts. One called the Nostalgia Road Trip, with me and a friend just talk a bunch of things of the past. We're grindly old men who complain about the current state of stuff, pop culture. And the other one is the Retro VGM Revival Hour, which is a podcast that's dedicated to video game music. It's just all video game music for hour plus, depending on the subject, theme, or composer. Again, both podcasts are available like on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud. And then on YouTube, I have the Nostalgia Road Trip channel, which is, which I document a series called the Saturday Morning Breakfast Mix, which video every month covers a particular Saturday morning or a weekday cartoon. But again, all of it can be found on nostalgiaroadtrip.com. Edgar Velasco. But aside from that, that's all I have. And if anybody wants to hit me up on PSN, it's the same thing. It's MoonSpiderHugs.
Absolutely. Well, dude, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing all your stories, and I'll definitely make sure to have all the links in the show notes for your website and your PlayStation Network name. Again, man, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you. And again, keep up the good work. I definitely enjoying your series, and definitely hope more people watch it, because listen to it, because it's definitely something that I think pulls at everyone's heartstrings. Growing up gaming.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. Thank you so much for being on the show, Edgar. Again, if you guys want to check out any of his stuff, the podcasts he has, his PlayStation Network, his Twitter, it'll be all in the show notes of this episode as well. If you guys want to be on an episode just like he was, go ahead and send me a tweet at GUG Podcast on Twitter, or you can send it to me personally at MitchPower1116 on Twitter as well. Again, thank you guys so much for returning to the show each and every week. Feel free to share it with a friend if you enjoy it. Leave me a review on iTunes. Let me know what I can do better, what I can do, what I'm doing right. Just let me know what you guys think of the show. Again, thank you guys so much for returning each and every week to the show, and I will catch you guys next week.